Hollywood in the 1950s, glamorous, glitzy, and unbelievably uptight? You bet. For every sparkling musical, there was a film yanked from screens for reasons that will make you shake your head. Forget graphic violence or politics. Some of these bans happened over a single word, a swing of a skirt, or even just the wrong kind of music. So here's a question. What did it really take to get banned in the so-called innocent decade? Stick around because you won't believe how bizarre it gets. The Moon is Blue, 1953. Let's kick off with a comedy that turned Hollywood's moral guardians into pearl-clutching sprinters. The Moon is Blue. On paper, this 1953 film was just a witty rom-com about a bachelor trying to win over a clever, independent woman. But director Otto Preminger, never one to color inside the lines, pushed buttons simply by letting his characters talk like real adults. Here's the bombshell. The offensive content? It was just the words virgin, seduce, and mistress. That's it. No racy scenes, no nudity, just a couple of perfectly normal words that sent the production code office into meltdown. The censors refused the film a seal of approval, calling it too suggestive. Catholic groups denounced it from the pulpit. Several major cities and even entire states straight up banned it. Did this moral panic kill the movie? Not even close. The Moon is Blue rode the scandal to box office glory, with moviegoers lining up just to see what the fuss was about. It became a watershed moment for free speech in film, cracking the armor of the infamous Hays Code and exposing the ridiculous double standards that Hollywood had tiptoed around for decades. Here's the punchline. All this chaos over language that wouldn't raise an eyebrow on TV today. If you've ever wondered how repressed America was in the 1950s, just remember, saying virgin could trigger a national crisis. And guess what? Otto Preminger laughed all the way to the bank, proving that sometimes the best way to break a taboo is to mock it out loud. Blackboard Jungle, 1955. Picture this. It's 1955, and the biggest threat to American society isn't communism or aliens, it's rock and roll. Enter Blackboard Jungle, a gritty drama about a teacher in a tough urban high school, facing down violence, racism, and raw teenage energy. But what really freaked out censors and parents? The opening chords of Rock Around the Clock. Yep, Bill Haley's now legendary anthem played over the credits and sent school boards into hysterics. Cities from Atlanta to Memphis banned the film, terrified it would incite juvenile delinquency. In the UK, screenings were sometimes halted because teens would start dancing in the aisles and, gasp, forming spontaneous rock and roll parties. Even some American schools posted guards to keep students from sneaking into the theater. The press blamed the movie for every brawl and busted window, as if showing a realistic classroom could magically turn honor students into hooligans. But here's what makes the ban especially weird. The film actually condemns violence and calls for hope and understanding. Yet authorities were so allergic to anything that even smelled like teenage rebellion, they'd rather sweep real problems under the rug. The panic over Blackboard Jungle wasn't about what was on screen. It was about what grown-ups feared was happening in the world outside. The movie ended up launching both rock music and a new kind of social realism in Hollywood. It broke the ice for films to tackle real, messy problems, no matter how hard the censors tried to stick their fingers in their ears. If you've ever danced to Rock Around the Clock, you can thank this film for getting banned so hard it became a movement. The Man with the Golden Arm, 1955. Frank Sinatra, heroin, jazz clubs. Welcome to The Man with the Golden Arm, the film that punched America right in the denial. In 1955, this Otto Preminger shocker told the story of a card dealer trying and failing to escape his addiction to heroin. It's intense, sweaty, and heartbreakingly real, but to the censors, it was basically a stick of dynamite. The Production Code Authority flat out refused to approve the movie, citing its graphic depiction of drug use. Major theater chains said they'd never show it. Religious leaders screamed about the moral decay of society. In some places, local authorities actually raided theaters to stop screenings, as if Frank Sinatra was handing out needles with every ticket. The big sin? The man with the golden arm dared to show addiction as a sickness, not just a moral failing, a radical idea in the 50s. But guess what happened? The outrage only made it hotter. Lines snaked around city blocks. Sinatra's raw, vulnerable performance won critical acclaim, and the film forced the industry to confront real-life issues. No more hiding behind fairy tales and happy endings. Otto Preminger's gamble paid off, shattering the production code's power and clearing the path for films to tackle the ugly side of life. So the next time you hear about a movie too real for Hollywood, remember, in the 50s, even showing someone in withdrawal was enough to get you banned and immortalized. And Sinatra? He went from crooner to acting heavyweight, proving there's nothing more dangerous or compelling than the truth. Baby Doll, 1956. If you ever want to see the American censorship machine reach full meltdown mode, look no further than Baby Doll. When Elia Kazan brought Tennessee Williams's steamy, southern fried story to the big screen, the result was outrage the likes of which most movie studios only dream about if they crave chaos. This film features Carol Baker as a young bride, living in a decaying mansion, caught between her bitter husband and a rival cotton gin owner. But here's the wild part. Nothing happens on screen that you wouldn't see at a backyard picnic. It's all about implication, tension, and the kind of glances that say more than dialogue ever could. What sent the country into a tailspin? It wasn't graphic content or anything explicit. It was mood, suggestion, and the power of what's left unsaid. The Catholic Legion of Decency declared it completely off-limits, and their condemnation was enough to spark protests outside theaters, letters to editors, and an avalanche of negative press. Southern towns banned it outright, and even in New York, the film was treated like contraband. But controversy is catnip for the curious. People lined up to see the movie everyone warned them about, and Baby Doll became a runaway success. It grabbed 4 Oscar nominations and put Carol Baker on the map as the queen of forbidden drama. The film proved you don't need to show everything to shock an audience. You just need to let their imaginations run wild. In the end, what got Baby Doll banned wasn't what it put on screen, but the way it dared America to admit what was already simmering beneath the surface. Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. The sight of James Dean in that crimson jacket, staring out over the city lights, is pure Hollywood iconography. But back in 1955, Rebel Without a Cause wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural earthquake. The adults in charge saw the film as an instruction manual for trouble. Switchblades, drag races, and teenagers pushing back against every authority figure in their lives. What was intended as a window into the hearts and struggles of American youth was seen as a spark that could ignite a powder keg. Cities across the United States and beyond didn't just frown at Rebel Without a Cause, they yanked it from screens. In places like New Zealand, it was shut down for fear it would corrupt an entire generation. Even in the UK, censors delayed its release and clipped away at the story. And when real-life fights broke out in theater lobbies, it gave those in power all the justification they needed to keep the film out of reach. Here's the real twist. The film's story is about longing for acceptance, for guidance, for meaning, hardly a call to arms for chaos. But when you ban a movie and label it dangerous, you guarantee every young person will want to see it. That's exactly what happened. The movie became a legend, and James Dean's misunderstood Rebel became a symbol of every teenager who felt alone. Rebel Without a Cause didn't invent youthful defiance, but it did prove that you can't keep a powerful story bottled up no matter how hard you try. The Wild One, 1953. Before Marlon Brando became Hollywood royalty, he was the leather-clad outsider, roaring through small towns on a motorcycle in The Wild One. When Brando's Johnny and his biker crew invade a sleepy community, they don't just kick up dust, they shake the whole culture to its core. The movie's attitude, not its action, is what made authorities across the Atlantic and at home hit the panic button. In the UK, The Wild One was forbidden for more than a decade, and plenty of American towns followed suit. Why? Not because it showed mayhem, but because it made being a misfit look cool. The worry was that teens would ditch their button-down shirts for black leather and trade the high school dance for the open road. Officials claimed the film would encourage gangs and lead to trouble far beyond the screen. But what's really going on here? The Wild One is all about feeling lost, searching for identity and the need to belong. Brando's now legendary line, "What are you rebelling against?" "What do you got?" became the slogan of a generation that wanted something more. The band didn't stop its influence, it only made the myth stronger. To this day, every story about outsiders and outcasts owes a little debt to the Wild One. Sometimes the most rebellious thing a movie can do is just show someone searching for their place in the world. Payton Place, 1957. If you think classic films tiptoed around real-life troubles, Payton Place is ready to set you straight. Based on a novel that was already setting off alarm bells across America, the film stripped away the glossy veneer of small-town life to show everything people worked hard to keep hidden: broken homes, heartbreak, and the consequences of looking the other way. The story was a jolt to the system in a decade that wanted to believe everything was just fine. Boston and several southern communities refused to screen Payton Place, while others demanded scenes be chopped out. Canada even joined the crackdown, banning the film in multiple provinces. What was all the fuss about? The movie depicted broken families, lost innocence, and the kind of tragedies that newspapers never dared print. Even though the film softened the novel's rawest moments, it still rattled the powers that be. Audiences, however, were captivated. They flocked to see the movie their neighbors were whispering about, and Payton Place became one of the biggest hits of its year. With 9 Oscar nominations, it paved the way for future films and TV shows to go deeper and get more real. What really got it banned wasn't what happened on screen, but the suggestion that no community is as spotless as it pretends. Sometimes, the truth is the most dangerous thing you can show. Picnic, 1955. Picnic is a sun-drenched vision of small-town life, complete with parades, checkered tablecloths, and that all-American romance vibe. But underneath the surface, this movie simmers with an energy that censors found just a little too honest. The scene that sparked the biggest uproar? A lakeside dance where William Holden and Kim Novak create a mood that's all tension and longing, no words required. Southern communities and religious groups reacted fast, declaring the dance improper and complaining that the movie encouraged feelings that polite society tried hard to hide. In some places, censors demanded cuts, and in others, the film never even reached the theater. Headlines warned of a movie that would erode public morals, and parents were told to keep their children away. But you can't keep curiosity bottled up for long. Moviegoers showed up in droves, eager to see what was so dangerous. The film ended up winning 6 Oscar nominations and helped pave the way for Hollywood to explore real relationships with more honesty than ever before. The true story of Picnic isn't just about summer love or heartache. It's about a turning point when movies dared to show that everyone has dreams and desires, even if they have to hide them. In the end, that's what made it impossible to ban from people's hearts. Tea and Sympathy, 1956. Hollywood in the 1950s was a place where a whisper could shake the walls. Tea and Sympathy is a prime example. This film follows Tom, a quiet boy at an elite prep school, targeted because he doesn't fit the traditional mold. He prefers art over sports, sensitivity over swagger, and that makes him an outsider. When the headmaster's wife shows him understanding, everything changes, and the censors lose their cool. Some American cities yanked Tea and Sympathy from theaters immediately. Dallas and Memphis led the charge, arguing the story encouraged behavior that clashed with accepted norms. The real issue? The film dared to treat difference with empathy. It wasn't just the plot that worried authorities. It was the idea that kindness to someone seen as different could be dangerous. That was enough to set off alarm bells, especially in a decade obsessed with conformity. Yet, for every community that banned the film, dozens more filled their seats. Audiences saw a story that reflected the quiet struggles happening in real homes and schools. Deborah Kerr's performance as the compassionate Laura turned heads and won hearts. Tea and Sympathy ended up opening minds, even as it shut a few doors. It remains a classic example of how powerful it is when a movie asks people to reconsider who deserves compassion. Compulsion, 1959. Compulsion is the kind of film that shakes people awake. Inspired by the real-life Leopold and Loeb case, it dives into the story of two privileged young men who commit a shocking crime simply to prove they can get away with it. That alone was enough to rattle censors. Add to that a legal defense that asks audiences to consider issues of justice and mercy, and you have a recipe for a ban. Some American cities and British regions refused to screen Compulsion. They called it too disturbing, too raw, too willing to explore the darkest corners of the human mind. The idea of young people committing terrible acts, not out of desperation, but out of cold curiosity, was more than the censors could handle. Many in authority worried that the film could inspire others or simply plant unwanted ideas. The truth, though, is that Compulsion asks tough questions about responsibility, conscience, and whether anyone is born evil. Orson Welles, as the defense attorney, delivers a closing speech that lingers long after the credits roll. Instead of sparking copycats, the film challenged viewers to think harder about crime and punishment. Sometimes the most difficult stories are the ones that need to be told, and that's exactly why this one met so much resistance. Kiss Me Deadly, 1955. Kiss Me Deadly takes the classic detective story and turns it inside out. Ralph Meeker's Mike Hammer is a private eye with a mean streak, chasing a mysterious box through a world where trust is always the first casualty. The movie is relentless, shadowy, and far more brutal than most of its time. That alone was enough to get censors worried. Religious groups and community leaders were even more alarmed by its unapologetically grim message. The film was banned in several U.S. towns, and community boards demanded cuts before they'd allow screenings. Critics accused Kiss Me Deadly of glorifying cruelty and showing a world with no heroes, just survivors. The infamous final scene, with its surreal, explosive imagery, only added to the controversy. The authorities weren't ready for a story that made the good guys look almost as flawed as the villains. Ironically, that's exactly what made Kiss Me Deadly a classic. It captured a mood of suspicion and fear that ran just beneath the surface in the 1950s. The movie's ban couldn't stop its influence. Modern thrillers still borrow its pacing and attitude. Sometimes the harshest stories are the ones that stick with us longest, even when others try to keep them out of sight. Storm Center, 1956. If there's one film that shows how deeply the Red Scare gripped America, it's Storm Center. Bette Davis stars as a librarian who refuses to remove a controversial book from her library shelves. The plot sounds simple, but in the 1950s, even the hint of sympathy for freedom of thought was enough to draw fire. Censors called it subversive and accused it of promoting ideas that challenged authority. In some American towns, Storm Center never played at all. It was blacklisted by communities that believed defending free speech was a threat to national security. School boards and politicians warned that the movie could poison the minds of youth. The real shock was that the film took no strong political stance. It just made the case for letting people decide for themselves what they read. Despite the bans, Storm Center was ahead of its time. Today, its message about the dangers of censorship is more relevant than ever. Bette Davis's portrayal of quiet courage is a lesson that sometimes doing the right thing can make you an outcast. The movie's fate reminds us that the fear of new ideas can be just as powerful as any law. The 7-Year Itch, 1955. Marilyn Monroe, a gust of air, and a white dress. Those are the images that made the 7-Year Itch both iconic and, in many places, banned. The story follows a faithful husband who starts to imagine a different life when a beautiful neighbor moves in. The real fireworks come when Monroe stands over a subway grate, and her dress billows upward, sending censors scrambling for their scissors. Ireland and several conservative towns in the United States declared the film unfit for public viewing. The reasons? They called the movie immodest and complained that it made light of commitment. Headlines warned that it would undermine public morals. Church leaders urged their communities to avoid it altogether. Yet the very things that worried authorities, the laughter, the fun, the honesty about temptation, are what audiences loved most. Monroe's charm and comic timing helped turn the film into a hit and cemented her status as a legend. The 7-Year Itch proves you don't have to go to extremes to stir up controversy. Sometimes all it takes is a little humor and a gust of wind. The result is a movie that's as memorable for its bands as for its box office success. Suddenly, last summer 1959. Suddenly, last summer arrived on the scene like a thunderclap, unafraid to probe the dark side of family, secrets, and the power people wield over each other. Elizabeth Taylor and Katharine Hepburn lead a cast where every glance and word hints at the troubles lurking beneath society's polished surface. The film doesn't shy away from tough subjects, mental health, trauma, and what happens when powerful people decide what's normal. For some censors, this was simply too much. In several American states and cities, the film was pulled from screens or only shown in a heavily edited form. Communities pointed to its discussions of psychological distress and family shame as reasons to keep it hidden from the public. Church groups led the charge, worried that the film's willingness to question authority and tradition would shake the foundations of polite society. The controversy didn't slow suddenly last summer down. Instead, it drove more moviegoers to see what all the fuss was about. The performances remain among the most riveting in classic Hollywood, and the story's refusal to tie everything up with a neat bow made it stand out in a decade obsessed with appearances. In the end, the very honesty that got it banned is what earned its lasting legacy. Some Like It Hot, 1959. Imagine a movie so charming, so genuinely funny, that its ban in several states only made it more legendary. That's Some Like It Hot, starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. The story is a wild chase. Two musicians disguise themselves as women to escape a gang, landing themselves in an all-female band and a whirlwind of misunderstandings. What truly ruffled feathers was its playful take on identity, relationships, and social boundaries. Kansas led the bans, calling the film morally offensive. Other communities followed, arguing that scenes of men in dresses and its clever, cheeky dialogue would somehow unsettle the foundations of society. It didn't help that the film poked fun at the very idea of strict rules. Instead of hurting its reputation, the bans turned Some Like It Hot into a sensation. Audiences loved the slapstick, the wit, and the daring approach to topics no one else would touch. Monroe, as always, brought a sparkle that couldn't be suppressed. The movie's closing line, "Nobody's perfect," became the perfect answer to every critic. In the end, it's proof that humor, honesty, and a little daring can outlast any ban. So there you have it, the wildest, weirdest, and most unexpected reasons a movie could get banned in the so-called golden age of Hollywood. Who would have guessed a dance, a word, or a gust of wind could stir up so much trouble? If you enjoyed this trip through history's strangest cinematic scandals, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let us know in the comments. Which of these bans shocked you most? Remember, sometimes the stories that get silenced are the ones we remember forever.